Members, good morning. We have a quorum. I call to order the meeting of the Bills Committee on Air Passenger Departure Tax, Bill 2025. After the last meeting on the 8th of April, the Secretariat published a notice on the website of the Council. We invited the public to provide written submissions on the bill. 18 district councils were also informed of the invitation. As at the due date, that is the 15th of April 2025, a total of 33 written submissions were received. The administration has already provided a response. We had sufficient discussion on the policy matters of the bill. We have invited representatives from the TLB and the FSTB to join us in the meeting today. Members will compare notes with the administration on the bill. At 10 o'clock or so, members will have to attend other Bills Committee meetings. So after the administration has taken us through the response, we will, first of all, go through the amendment moved by Mr. Perry before we move on to clause-by-clause scrutiny. All right, members may now press the button to request to speak. Then I will give the floor to the administration to take us through the consolidated response. Administration, the floor is yours. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members. Last week, we already provided a written response to the Legislative Council Secretariat for members' reference. I'd like to elaborate on two main points. That's about the stance of the administration. The APDT will be increased from $120 to $200. I understand there are concerns by members and the community. We consider the increase acceptable and reasonable. There are three main reasons. For short-haul and long-haul visitors, they spend an average of $6,000 to $7,000 in Hong Kong. The increase of $80 only accounts for some 1% of their total spending in Hong Kong. I believe this won't have any impact on their incentive to visit Hong Kong. I hope members will also understand this is a fiscal measure to increase revenue for the government. We last increased the APDT 22 years ago. The increase was about 60% or so. The increase in the APDT this time around is comparable to that seen in 2003. Despite the increase of 60% or so, the actual amount is just $80. The Airport Authority charged the airport construction fee in August 2016. There had been an increase in the number of visitors until the epidemic struck Hong Kong, so we consider the increase reasonable and acceptable. Members are concerned about the impact on transfer passengers, so at last meeting, we already undertook that we would move an amendment as soon as possible. We will relax the requirement for passengers taking off at the airport on the same day to those that will depart the next day. We want to minimize the impact on passengers. We are in talks with the Airport Authority and the Transport and Logistics Bureau. We will discuss how to grant further exemptions to transfer passengers arriving at Hong Kong through land and sea boundary control points. That concludes my response. I'll see if members have any questions. My team and I are happy to take members' questions. All right. The administration has already taken us through the paper CB/1673/202502. That is the consolidated response made by the administration. 5 members have pressed the button to request to speak. They are Mr. Chen Xiu-hong, Mr. Benson Luk, Mr. Perry Yu, Mr. Lam Chun-sing, and Dr. Tan Yuehang. 5 members in total. All right, 4 members each, 4 questions, 4 minutes each for each member, questions and answers included. Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. Thank you, Chairman. I've heard the consolidated response given by the administration. The response is quite comprehensive. I'd like to take this opportunity to ask the Permanent Secretary to explain to us further. The industry is in general against the increase in the APDT. As I understand, some of them aren't against an increase, but then the extent is too much. We need to take into account the impact on low-cost carriers as well as the number of visitors. The actual amount is quite substantial when we take into account the airport construction fee as well. The PS said that he had already heard from members and would go back to study if there were further measures. Today, based on the written response, we can see very clearly that the response is similar to what the PS said at last meeting. So I'd like to know why the PS didn't consider implementing the APDT increase in 2 phases. The points given in the written reply is actually similar to what the PS said. That is, the increase in the APDT shouldn't make much of an impact on visitors. I want to know why the PS considers the increase in the APDT reasonable. So can the PS explain to us? Mr. Lai? Thank you, Mr. Chan. We did consider very carefully whether we would implement the increase in the APDT in 2 phases, or in phases rather. We talked with different colleagues and we considered this might not be the most appropriate method. Starting from 2027, airport fees would go up for 4 years in a row. We don't want to give visitors an impression that we keep increasing fees or APDT. So we want to do so in one go. I understand the increase or in terms of the percentage point may be too much, but the actual amount is just about $80. We consider doing so at one go better than doing so in phases. While we were preparing for the implementation of the measure, this is actually a measure for increasing revenue. It is a fiscal measure. We're going to increase government revenue by $1.6 billion for 1 year. We've noted members' concerns, so we will relax the requirement in relation to transfer passengers from just 1 day to the following day as well. This will affect some 800,000 passengers. Then we will receive $160 million less. That is, the revenue foregone will be $160 million per year. So we won't receive $1.6 billion. We need to keep certain income before we can deal with other matters. In other words, why would visitors come to Hong Kong instead of flying through the airport in Shenzhen or Guangzhou? We will cover more passengers. We might incur more revenue foregone, but in the end, we aim at having a positive impact. After all, this is a measure for increasing revenue. Thank you. Next member, Mr. Benson Locke. Thank you, Chairman. On the last occasion, I suggested to the administration incorporating a sunset clause. In paragraph 6, the administration said that there would be a mechanism to formulate appropriate public finance measures every year. For the hotel tax, it was last increased in 2003 and in 2008 when the government's fiscal position improved. It was reduced to zero in 2008. The government provided data to support the increase in the APDT, and they cited the inflation factor. We can refer to paragraph 3A. That is, the cumulative inflation rate is about 64%, but then I'm a little bit concerned. The APDT hasn't been adjusted for 22 years, and now when we are going to increase the APDT, we use the cumulative inflation rate as one of the reasons. In the future, will the APDT only be adjusted upwards? That is because the administration used the cumulative inflation rate as a reason. I don't think we should link the increase or link the adjustments in APDT to the inflation factor. I hope the administration will clarify this point. Otherwise, if the administration is going to use the inflation factor every year, the APDT will only go up. It won't go down. As I understand, the industry is concerned that the increase in the APDT will affect visitors. That is whether they want to visit Hong Kong. We support the administration in relaxing the requirement, that is, passengers taking off at the airport on the same day to those leaving the next day. There should also be extension in relation to covering transfer passengers arriving at Hong Kong through land and sea BCPs. Is there any timetable for the industry so that they can plan ahead? They will know there is a date by which this measure will end. Can you give us a timetable in addition to proposed commencement date of the 1st of October? Thank you, Mr. Locke. In relation to the increase in the APDT, yes, Mr. Locke, you are right. The APDT will be increased from $120 to $200. We have already taken into account a basket of factors. We didn't link the proposed increase to any one single factor. We didn't just use the cumulative inflation rates. We think the increase in the APDT is acceptable. We didn't base the increase on just the inflation rate. There is no sunset clause at present for the APDT. Will it be adjusted downwards in the future? Well, at the end of the day, we'll have to take into account different policy considerations as well as the public finance position. Mr. Perry, you may be familiar with the hotel accommodation tax. It hasn't been levied for a long time, but because of the fiscal position, we resume the charging of the hotel accommodation tax, and the liquor duty is the same. From the perspective of commercial factors, these are factors we take into account.
On the second point, Mr. Lok made a good point. It's about the exemption. Passengers catching the connecting flight on the second day will also enjoy exemption. That's our proposal. And we will also be looking at ways to further extend the exemption to other travelers arriving overland or by sea. We will hammer out the proposal this year. And when we do have a proposal, that will come to LegCo before it is implemented. LegCo elections are coming up by the end of this year, so we can only do our best to try to get the change implemented this year. Any further exemption that can help the tourism sector and strengthen our role as an aviation hub, that's something we will speed up. Thank you. Mr. Perry Yu. Thank you, Chairman. I'm a board member of the Airport Authority. I've just heard the reply from the Permanent Secretary. I have some observations about this written reply. There's a policy inconsistency. I have to point that out. We're trying to get travelers to come here. Different departments are trying to support and boost our tourism sector. We want travelers who will arrive by air. Many travelers come here by taking flights and then they spend their night here. But then we're also increasing the hotel accommodation tax, and now we're proposing the air passenger departure tax. This policy inconsistency is troubling me. So are we making this all-out effort to promote tourism? In 2017 and 18, arrival numbers were up and up, even after the airport construction fee. But is that a good example? Back then, we were at the peak of the tourism sector. Now, the fact show that our airport passenger flow is only at 71% of our peak back in 2018. So now we have to redouble our effort to attract more travelers so that we can give full play to the effect of the third runway. Even if we see a further increase in inbound travelers after this increase in the ATPT, have we assessed how much increase we would be foregoing? Have we assessed when we will return to the 2018 level? I see some figures cited in the reply, but I don't think that's appropriate example. The government said the rise or resuming in the collection of the HAT will be fine. It will only be a minor increase in travelers' expenses. And now the same justifications are cited for the proposed increase in the APTDT, and I find these reasons unconvincing. Most of the written submissions are against the proposed increase, with viable alternatives suggested. Indeed, travelers catching their connecting flight on the following day of departure will get exemption. I welcome this proposed extension of the exemption. Then there are travelers arriving by rail or overland through the other boundary control points. the government should move faster with the studies on exempting them as well. That way, we can serve not just the domestic market, but also travelers from the rest of the GBA. I welcome that, but we lack a timetable. A plan may be finalized by the end of this year, but when can we put those changes in practice? And then we get no sunset clause. I'm trying to moderate this proposed increase by my proposed amendment, and the industry has also proposed a phased implementation of the increase, and this warrants serious consideration by the government. Have we assessed the impact of this increase in one go? Can we take a phased approach instead? Wouldn't that be better for the recovery of the tourism sector? So we have people from two bureaus. First, we will hear from Mr. Andrew Lai. I will say a few words, and then my colleague from the Transport and Logistics Bureau will respond to the question. We can totally understand Mr. Yu's concern for the tourism sector. It is not the government's policy to stifle the tourism industry. In fact, we have a blueprint for the tourism sector's development. We have all sorts of schemes for tourism. The point is to get more tourists to come here. The passenger flow at the airport has recovered at a slower pace than expected. That has to do with the capacity of our airlines. Over the past year, things have improved. Now, coming back to Mr. Yu's concerns, we are proposing a measure to increase our revenue. For outbound travelers, they will have to pay $80 extra. But then we're also taking steps to soften the blow for travelers coming here. So we will be granting more exemptions. On the second point, on travelers coming here by land or by sea, when we can finalize the plans, we will be able to finalize the proposals within this year. We work with the Tourism Board and the Tourism Commission. We will propose an exemption for passengers catching the connecting flight on the following day. So what we're thinking about is maybe more publicity, and we can work with the tourism sector to make good use of this tool. That's to attract more tourists to come here. That way, tourists won't just be waiting at the airport. They can go on a trip to our urban center or to Lantau. They can visit different attractions. They can spend money here. So that's where we can do more on together. Mr. Calvin Ma from the Transport and Logistics Bureau. Thank you. Mr. Lai explained the thinking behind the proposed increase in the APDT. For us, the TLB, we will work with the airport authority and the tourism industry to think about ways to make us more competitive. Our airport is competitive mostly because of the network and the service quality, as well as the efficiency. So we will work on these areas. We will be further expanding our flight networks. We will be promoting our intermodal transport networks with the rest of the GBA. We're also working with the airport authority on the development of an airport city. We want to make Hong Kong a more attractive place for transit travelers. And that will strengthen our airport's competitiveness in the long term. Mr. Lam Chen-sing. I thank the Permanent Secretary for explaining the matter clearly. He also briefed us on his ideas. We have a fiscal deficit. The government wants to boost revenue. Indeed, the APDT warrants consideration because this tax is not targeted at grassroots, and any increase will not affect the lives of grassroots directly. So we are not against the increase. Now the question is about the extent of the increase. Is it really right to go all the way to $200 in one go? Mr. Perry Yu is outspoken on this point. Of course, it's best to have no increase. But Mr. Yu appears to accept some sort of increase. He's simply against the extent of the increase. So can his point be considered? The government says it's not a great idea to have this haggling and this bargaining going on like what you do at the wet market. But that's what you do when you disagree over the rate. The minimum wage has been under negotiations and the bargaining has been over changes of 50 cents. 20 years ago, we increased the rate from $80 to $120. And now this proposed increase is only in line with what we had. So if we can increase the rate from $120 to $180, that would be more in line with the increase back then from $80 to $120. So why not consider the same increase as we had 20 years ago? Another point was about a phased increase. Let's first increase it to $160, and then a couple of years from now, we can increase it further to 200 years. Can that be done? We asked that question, and then the Permanent Secretary said, increasing the rates would not be a good look. But then many government changes have taken the form of phased increases. Take the cap on MPF contributions. It started at $25,000. It's now at $30,000. If you talk things over and agree on the changes, people will not take issue with the increase. A phased increase in the APDT would meet with less opposition from travelers. Why not consider a phased increase instead? Over to the government. Thank you. Our thinking is to contain costs and increase revenue in the budget. And when we do increase revenue, we will try to minimize the impact on people. That's our guiding principle. The proposed increase appears to be more than 60%, but the absolute increase is only $80. The point I'm trying to drive home is that we propose to exempt passengers arriving for the connecting flight on the following day. That will mean $160 billion in foregone revenue. We're not trying to skimp on the exemptions. We're trying to maximize the effect of our resources in a targeted way. We're increasing the tax by $80, and that will bring extra revenue. The government will not be pocketing the full extra revenue. There will be some exemptions, just like what you have with targeted poverty relief. Some travelers are particularly price sensitive, especially travelers from the rest of the GBA. For those travelers, we will have broader exemptions. We want those people to come here to spend money. So we will first need some extra revenue before we can grant the exemptions. So we have taken into account many factors, and then we have decided on this proposed increase. And then we will think about the two exemptions, and this is the appropriate way to go. And hopefully we can also bring more visitors for the tourism sector.
彭議員。
All right, next member, Dr. Tan Yueheng. Thank you, Chairman. The government's measure is aimed at increasing revenue and addressing the fiscal deficit facing Hong Kong at present. I support the direction of the policy. We will generate revenue by implementing this policy, but we'll also have to take into account whether the demand will be stimulated or suppressed. If the demand is suppressed, then there will be further reduction in the revenue. So can the increased revenues offset the possible revenue foregone? We need to take into account the impact. That is, we need to take into account the difference. We have to take into account the elasticity of the airfares. If visitors are price sensitive, then they may not take the flight. But then for passengers who are less price sensitive, they may not be affected by the increase in the APDT. If you increase the APDT by $80, will there be fewer passengers, or will they be driven to take other modes of transport? Say about, do you have any statistics about the proportion of short-haul passengers leaving through the Hong Kong airport every day? The APDT is proposed to be increased from $120 to $200. Will we provide more discounts to passengers? So despite the increase in the APDT, passengers will receive more goodies or have better experience at the Hong Kong International Airport. They may feel better as a result. This measure targets passengers, and there are about 40 passengers to 50,000 passengers transferring through the Hong Kong airport. If we target visitors, people may ask whether you will consider covering passengers arriving at Hong Kong through land and BCPs as well. You may have to give it some thought. Thank you. P.S. Thank you, Dr. Tan. Yes, indeed, we'll have to tread very cautiously. We don't want to charge $80 more, but in the end suffer in the long run. So how can we avoid any unnecessary loss that our economy would suffer? We mainly work on three fronts. First of all, in relation to exemption, we are actively considering two types of exemptions. We want to minimize the impact on visitors. On top of exemptions, if transfer passengers will be able to leave the airport to spend a day in Hong Kong without having to pay the APDT, we need to consider how to lead this group of passengers to the city area of Hong Kong so that there will be more economic contributions made by this type of transfer passengers. All along, we don't compete on prices. We compete on air connectivity. We enhance the appeal of our international airport to compete with our neighboring regions. That is exactly why passengers will choose the Hong Kong International Airport to travel or to go on business trips. And we'll continue with our efforts on this front. Dr. Tan talked about an irregular mechanism to review the impact on low-cost carriers as well as the impact on the number of visitors, especially short-haul visitors from the TLB. Well, in relation to possible future adjustments in the increase, as the FSTB said, there will be a review in the future. And I'd like to supplement, the airport authority will stay in touch with the industry. We want to create more products to attract more visitors to choose Hong Kong International Airport. We also want to enhance the efficiency of arrival immigration controls. This will help us enhance the status of Hong Kong International Airport. I will draw a line after Dr. Wendy Hong speaks. Now, Mr. Gary Zhang. Thank you. Just now, the PS talked about some general directions. I'm an engineer, so I'd look at the facts. You need to show analyses. Just now, Dr. Tan made a very good point. Leisure passengers are different from business passengers. There's a difference between long-haul passengers and short-haul passengers as well. The supplementary paper is silent on this point. Without such analyses, how can you be so confident as to tell members that you won't suffer as a result, or we won't suffer any financial loss in the long run? The airport construction fee was last increased in 2016. The number of visitors increased back then, but I'd like to point out in 2017 and 2018, our airport was at the saturation stage. We had 2 runways back then. We were already at saturation back then. Now we have had the 3rd runway in operation, but then we haven't yet recovered to 80% of our peak. There's a lack of scientific data. Next, on the inflation rate, let's take a look at 2002. What was the inflation rate in 2002? Back then, the APDT was $80 only, plus $20 for the airport security fee. What about now? At least $300, about $400. It's about 3 times or 4 times of increase. What about the inflation rate? The increase in the inflation rate is only about 60%. It's not fair to just compare the inflation rate MP and the APDT. We're talking about airfares as a whole. Just now you talked about increasing the fees at one go. Don't give the public the impression that you're going to increase the APDT in phases. So why don't you do the same for the exemptions? Why don't you grant exemptions in one go? You need to think how to best help the Hong Kong International Airport to continue to be the international aviation hub. Why must we increase and later we will grant exemptions. Probably we'll have to wait until the next term of the Legislative Council. Is this reasonable? Yes, indeed, we don't compete on prices, and it's not just about prices when it comes to the reputation of the Hong Kong International Airport. We don't just compete on prices, but we do need to treasure what we have. It doesn't mean we don't have to base on any scientific basis. Is that a scientific decision? P.S. Thank you. I understand the point of Mr. Gary Zhang. We had 50 million visitors last year, most of whom were local residents in Hong Kong. And I believe paying $80 more won't cause much of an impact on the overall financial burden of local residents. As for transfer passengers, especially for GBA passengers transferring at the Hong Kong International Airport, will there be any impact? Well, I can say that we will minimize impact for this type of passengers. Say for transfer passengers, we will relax the requirement for those leaving on the same day to those leaving the next day. For those arriving at Hong Kong through land and sea BCPs, especially for those from the GBA, when we grant further exemptions to this type of passengers, they won't have to pay $200, not even $120. This will be a positive impact. In relation to the timetable of exemptions, I'd like to explain. This bill only deals with the increase in the APDT from $120 to $200. We have undertaken that the exemption criteria for transfer passengers will be relaxed for those leaving the airport on the same day to those leaving on the next day as well. We'll have to amend the second schedule. We have taken the advice from the DOJ. We cannot deal with all the amendments by one single CSA, committee stage amendment. I do want to do so if it was possible. Airlines told us that they would take around 3 months' time to make adjustments in their computer systems in order to stay in line with our policy. So in June and July the latest, we will table our amendments to the Legislative Council. It will take effect on the 1st of July. In relation to the second phase, that is for the passengers arriving at Hong Kong through land and sea BCPs, we are still hammering out the implementation details. But then we'll have to make sure we don't drag our feet. Otherwise, there will be a delay in the adjustments in the airline's computer systems. We don't want to see this. We want to deal with all these within this year. All right. Anything from the TLB in relation to the statistics? No. Thank you. 3 more members would like to speak. Next member, Dr. Wendy Hong, followed by Dr. Ben Chen and Mr. Perry Yu in his second round. All right, I'll draw a line.
Thank you. We're looking at a huge deficit, and I can understand government efforts to increase revenue. I want to follow up on the point about policy inconsistency mentioned by Mr. Yu. It's hard to increase revenue. We tried 4 things last year: 2-tier rate, income tax, collecting the HAT again, also increasing the business registration fee. Altogether, we got $3.15 billion in extra revenue. Now we will expect an extra revenue of $1.4 billion. And then we have another controversial proposal, the land transport, the cross-boundary facility fee, and then we're also offering tax refund, $1,500 per family, and then we're also offering rate exemption. Some owners are saying those refunds mean little to them, and we are spending an extra $4.8 billion on those concessions. We have such a hard time. We have to put in so much work to increase revenue. And then we're also offering concessions at the same time. You have to consider your efforts to boost revenue and concessions holistically. So policy inconsistency really deserves consideration. I think the APDT will have a greater impact than the boundary facilities construction fee. The government promised reviews. So can I get the government to promise a review of the higher APDT to see if we're actually getting less by charging more? A response from the government, please. For the government, boosting revenue and containing costs are both tough. The financial secretary proposed that the government should lead by example. We should start by containing costs with increasing revenue as a supplementary measure. And we're only proposing this increase in the APDT. Now, as for the rates and the salaries tax, those are measures that are discretionary in nature. Those measures involve no long-term financial implications. But for this proposal, the proposed increase in the APDT, we're getting more than $1 billion every year. I know that top of mind for Dr. Hong and Mr. Perry Yu is that we should guard against unintended consequences. When we compile the budget every year, we review all the factors, our fiscal position, all the factors. When changes are needed, we will make such changes in a timely way. Dr. Ben Chen. The proposed increase in the APDT is $80. Mr. Perry Yu has worked hard on this matter, especially on the point about transit or transfer passengers. The most contentious point about this bill is that the proposed increase may affect people who are coming here, stopping for a short time for the connecting flight. Now the government has pledged an amendment, so the government has taken steps. On the $80 increase, should this be a phased increase or should this be an increase in one go? It's better to have this increase in one go, and that would be easier to follow for people outside Hong Kong. You pay a single amount, and that's it. Of course, the proposed increase will affect the tourism sector. Mr. Perry Yu has highlighted their difficulty. So let's find some ways to support the tourism sector. But for us, we're trying to approach this matter through the lens of an outsider. When you have repeated increases, predictability suffers for people outside Hong Kong. That's our concern. Fees and charges are on the way up. many things have changed. The fuel surcharge, for example, there was a cap. Now the surcharge can keep going up. The cap was lifted from the fuel surcharge, and now that surcharge has gone up and up. So let's also consider the burden on people. So for us, it's better to have this increase in one go. That makes it easier. A response from the government. We are of one mind with Dr. Ben Chen. Increasing the rate in one go will offer greater certainty. For a traveler coming here 2 years in a row, they may get the false impression that we constantly increase our fees, and that may not do our image any service. So there are merits with having this increase in one go. We'd fully appreciate the importance of tourism to Hong Kong. We have other measures to attract tourists. We will continue to work on those areas so that we can attract more tourists. Now, on the fuel surcharge, any response from the TLB? No response. Thank you. So we come to the second round. Mr. Perry, let's do 3 minutes, questions and answers inclusive. This is not about bargaining at the wet market. My concern has always been the competitiveness of our airport. I'm not going to repeat the point raised by Mr. Gary Zhang. I proposed my amendment because I would like to see greater attention to the competitiveness of our airport. I wonder if people have noticed that we have yet to fully recover our pre-COVID peak in transit passengers and passenger flow. The entire aviation landscape has changed. Is the government aware of these changes? People from Hong Kong now catch their flight in Shenzhen instead, and then the mainland is offering more and more international flights. This proposed increase in the APDT will also affect the willingness of airlines to set up new flight routes here. And people from Hong Kong will also think twice about whether to take a flight in Hong Kong. 53 million travelers in Hong Kong, 40% of them are Hong Kong residents, 22% of them are transfer passengers. We want more transfer passengers and inbound visitors. The government has pledged wide exemptions for transfer passengers. We welcome that. I commissioned the Electrical Secretariat to do a study on enhancing our airport's competitiveness. Let's look at our fees and charges. They will have an impact on our airport's competitiveness. We shouldn't be just looking at the APDT in isolation. We have to look at things in the round. We should moderate the increase in the APDT because that has a bearing on our competitiveness. The industry has made its position clear. Airlines, trade associations, and the public have concerns about the increase, and they take issue with such a staggering increase. So I invite the government to revisit this proposed increase. And we should think of ways to improve our competitiveness. So can we have more resources going into automated customs clearance? Can we work on sustainable aviation fuel? Can we speed up the development of the infrastructure for SAF? I'm sorry for overrunning. I know the government has considered the comments from the tourism sector. We're having a rational conversation here. But the government should pay greater attention to the airport's overall competitiveness. Any response? We share Mr. Perry Yu's views. We're approaching this proposed increase with care. We're trying not to compromise Hong Kong's role as an aviation hub. We're trying to minimize the impact on the tourism sector. That's why we're proposing a broader exemption. We're trying to mitigate the impact. The wider exemptions may lead to less revenue for the government. But we're hoping the wider exemptions will get more passengers to come here for their connecting flight, and we want transfer passengers to spend time outside the airport. We are trying to maximize the benefits, and we hope members can support this position. Thank you. So we will first deal with the proposed amendment from Mr. Perry Yu. Mr. Perry Yu's draft amendment is in CB bracket 1570/2025 bracket 01. So members, please refer to the draft amendment from Mr. Yu. So will Mr. Perry Yu give us the highlights of his draft amendment? Chairman, as I said, this massive increase in the APDT will bring greater uncertainty to the tourism sector as we're trying to recover our status as an aviation hub. There will be an impact. Will this slow down our recovery? The government has failed to give us a convincing account as to why they're proposing such an increase. The government is not vigilant enough to the changes in the landscape, and we should approach the proposed increase with greater care. That's why I'm proposing an increase to $160 instead of $200, meaning I'm proposing to halve the increase. As we're trying to achieve a recovery of our sector. I get it. We have a deficit. The FSTB has taken on board comments from members of this Bills Committee. So I'm proposing a compromise solution. I'm proposing a $40 increase instead of $80. $40, and we will get $800 million in extra revenue. $40 is quite an increase. It's more than 30%. We're approaching this in a rational way. We're trying to work out the problem. We're trying to find a solution. That's why I'm proposing this halfway house. A more modest increase will allow us time to observe the impact on the recovery, and that will mean less uncertainty. This will be the prudent way forward. I'm proposing a moderate, rational, and prudent amendment, and this is also striking a balance between extra revenue and recovery of the tourism sector. I hope members of the Bills Committee can support my amendment. You also propose a second change. Now, the government has actively responded to our proposal to exempt passengers in cases of next-day departure. We welcome this. My third call is to move faster. in granting exemptions for mainland inbound travelers arriving by land and by sea. Let's move fast on this and let's put that into practice. Otherwise, our tourism sectors, our aviation sector's recovery will suffer.
局咧已經
All right, Mr. Perry Yu has explained his amendment, and the administration has already responded in the paper CB brackets 1673/2025 brackets 02. So the requirement is proposed to be relaxed to cover passengers that are going to take off at the airport the next day. Does Mr. Perry Yu accept this amendment? If you do, then you do not have to move this amendment. All right. Now I'll give the floor for the administration to respond. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the letter dated the 3rd of April, Mr. Perry Yu mentioned 2 amendments and 1 proposal. We already undertook that we would follow up on Mr. Perry Yu's first amendment immediately. In relation to further exemptions to passengers flying through Hong Kong, we will discuss with the Transport and Logistics Bureau, and we will firm up the details by the end of this year. In other words, we have undertaken to implement 2 amendments, and regarding the increase in the APDT, we hope to implement the increase in the APDT in one go instead of implementing the increase in phases. We appeal to members for your understanding. All right, any follow-up by Mr. Perry Yu? No? Do we agree on the administration's response? And Mr. Perry Yu, do you have any views on the administration's response? All right, the Legislative Council President will have to decide whether the proposed amendment is in line with the rules of procedure. In Rule 57, it sets out the relevant provision. In other words, it needs to be relevant to the bill, and the President considers the long title of the bill as well as the executive summary, the provisions, as well as other relevant factors before a decision is made by the President. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Legal Advisor. I now ask members whether you agree with Mr. Perry Yu on downward adjustments on the increase in the APDT. Point of order. May the Chairman explain or clarify when members moved an amendment at this stage? Members will have to make it clear whether this amendment will be moved in the committee stage. If you object to doing so, even if Mr. Perry Yu moves this amendment, if we are against moving this amendment in the committee stage, there may be different views in the Bills Committee, and members may raise their views in the council meeting. We need to set the record straight. Otherwise, the audience on the live broadcast may not be clear as to our practice. Legal Advisor. Thank you, Chairman. If member is moving the amendment in the name of the committee stage, I will prepare or draft the amendment on behalf of the Bills Committee. If Mr. Perry Yu chooses to use other methods, we will provide assistance as well. All right. If the Bills Committee, if over half of the members in the Bills Committee agree, then we may consider whether I myself, as the chairman, will move this amendment. If more than half of the members are against it, then the Legislative Council President will have to make a decision. Mr. Perrier will decide whether he will move an amendment in his own name. Mr. Perrier may still move this amendment by making an application to the President of the Council to move this amendment in his own name. All right, by a show of hands. If members agree on the proposal to decrease the increase in APDT, if you agree, please raise your hands. 4 members, 5 members. Those against it, please raise your hand. Those against it, please raise your hand. Five members. There's no unanimous decision. Legal advisor.
OK，由於唔係即
All right. We don't have a majority of members agreeing on Mr. Perrier's proposal, so you will have to seek permission from the Legislative Council President. If he approves, then you may move your amendment in your own name in the council meeting. All right, let's move on to clause-by-clause scrutiny. I'll give the floor for the administration. All right, I will ask the Principal Assistant Secretary to take members through the bill. All right, I'll first talk about the long title of the bill. Air Passenger Departure Tax Amendment Bill 2025. It provides that the part of air passenger departure tax approved to be retained by aircraft operators to offset the collection fee payable to them does not form part of the general revenue, to increase the air passenger departure tax, and to provide for related matters. There are a total of 5 clauses under the bill. The first one, short title and commencement. In relation to the commencement date, Section 5 comes into operation on the 1st of October 2025. For the remaining clauses, they will come into effect when the bill is gazetted. Clause 2, Air Passenger Departure Tax Ordinance amended. The ordinance is amended as set out in Section 3, 4, and 5. Clause 3, Section 7 amended, Assessment and Payment of Tax. Members may refer to pages 1 and 2 of the marked-up copy. Section 7 of the ordinance provides Section 7 Bracket 2 will be added. In assessing the amount of the tax under subsection brackets 1, the director must take into account any amount of the tax that the operator is approved to retain under Section 10 brackets 2. Mr. Holden Chow, after you have received tax, do operators have the right to use some of the tax? I'm not sure. I want to make sure whether my understanding is correct. Any response from the administration? Chairman, operators have already deducted the administration fee before giving the amount to the administration. So when the administrative fee is deducted, in accordance with the Public Finance Ordinance, we cannot do so. So the money will have to go to the FSTB before the amount is given to the Civil Aviation Department. In the amendment today, we set out clearly that airlines can reduce the administration fee, and it will not be credited to the government's revenue account. So this is an arrangement in relation to accounting. Simply put, the practice for airlines remains the same. After airlines have deducted the administration fees, then they will have to give the remaining sum to the government. We move this amendment just to comply with our accounting practice. Mr. Chen. Section 2A. The director must take into account any amount of the tax that the operator is approved to retain under Section 10 Practice 2. Just now, Bruno said that this is in relation to the accounting practice. And under Section 10, it says so clearly that this doesn't form part of the general revenue for the purposes of Section 3, Practice 1 on the Public Finance Ordinance. I understand the reason why you do so, but I'd like to ask more. Without this provision today, is the practice in breach of the Public Finance Ordinance? In other words, any income in relation to tax forms part of the general revenue. The FS will have to retain a sum of the tax. Then, that sum of the tax will be used to pay the operators. So in the future, you won't have to retain this fee anymore. Is that correct? That is because under the budget, the CAD has already reduced the operating fee that is approved by the Financial Secretary. I want the administration to take us through sections 7 and 10 together, so we will get a better idea of the practice. All right. Mr. Chen may be worried that there would be a precedent. That is, the amount of the tax will not directly go to the public coffers. For government tunnels, there are contracts and by which we'll have to pay to the operators. For the amount deducted, the service fee doesn't form part of the general revenue of the government. In accordance with the Public Finance Ordinance Cap 2, unless otherwise stated, it won't form part of the general revenue. That is exactly why we need to settle clearly in the bill. That is, airlines can deduct the administration fee first. And that will streamline the procedures on the part of the administration. And when it is being deducted at present, is that at odds with the Public Finance Ordinance? Well, that is not the case. In the estimates of expenditure, this has already been approved by the Legislative Council. It means that the administration fee can be deducted first, then it will go to the general revenue of the government later on. So this is actually legal. but then we'll have to set aside an amount of expenditure in the budget. There may be fluctuations in the number of passengers. With the new practice, we don't have to budget for this sum of the money, and then we will also be able to streamline the procedures.
先生律政
Can we also get the Department of Justice to explain how this works to us? Mr. Wallace. As the Permanent Secretary has explained, what we do now is in line with the Public Finance Ordinance. Our proposed change will mean less administrative work, means less money going between different accounts in the future. So the change here will mean that the revenue coming in will be an amount less the administrative or maintenance or management fees charged by operators, and then the money will come into our coffers. There's an item in the books of the Civil Aviation Department, and that's the management fee or administrative fee to the operators. So you have amount coming in, less an amount charged by operators, but that is not reflected in the government account. Previously, it was reflected because the CAD has to set aside an amount of money. The problem with the proposed change here is that you won't see the amount deducted, reflected in the government account. So is this a step forward or a step backward? I support anything to increase efficiency because there will be less rerouting of money. But my concern is that you will have a harder time tracing where the money is coming in with this change. So this is a question of accounting transparency. Will this change make it harder for us to trace the money coming in? Thank you. Mr. Chen is right. This change is to streamline the internal administrative accounting arrangements. We have always acted in accordance with the law. But some may wonder that as things stand, we can tell the amount of the administrative fee, but that may not be the case in the future. But there's a well-established percentage for the administration fee. So in the future, the CAD can release the administration fees paid to operators. So people in the future will still be able to see the information. So we will maintain transparency. And at the same time, we can streamline the needless administrative arrangements. Dr. Wendy Hong. My first question was asked by Mr. Chen Xiuhong. My question is, how much of the $120 we charge in the APDT was deducted in administration fees? And when we increase the APDT to $200, how much of the $200 will be deducted in administration fees? The fees are charged by the airlines. They charge roughly 2%. And for a long time, the rate has stayed at 2% or so. We have talked to airlines about the proposed increase in the APDT. And we have agreed that the administration fee will stay at 2%. Members may think that since we're charging a higher APDT and we are keeping the rate at 2%, airlines will be charging more in absolute terms. That's valid. The 2% rate has remained unadjusted for 20 years. The government and the airlines agree that this rate is acceptable to both sides. So you're saying the increase will be from $2.40 to $4 when you look at $120 as your denominator. So it's 2% of the tax. Dr. Wendy Hong, follow-up questions? No. Mr. Perry Yu. Thank you, Chairman. Travel agencies also help the government collect these fees and charges. Government travel agencies are performing the service for free, and we should recognize the work done by travel agencies. Increasing the APDT will be adding to the burden on travel agencies. I'm also a board director of a travel agency myself. I'm not saying the government should pay travel agencies back, but can we have some sort of support from the government for travel agencies as an industry? Of course, airlines work with travel agencies. Can we have some sort of support for travel agencies? Those agencies are having a hard time. Intermediaries are having a harder and harder time. Travel agencies are having a hard time because these agencies have to pay the fees upfront from their own pockets first. When you increase the APDT by $80, that means a heavier burden on travel agencies, and that warrants government attention. Mr. Yu's point is that whether there will be an impact on the cash flow of travel agencies. Agencies may have deals in place with airlines. Agencies used to pay $120 upfront, and in the future, they will have to pay $200 instead. So can we give assistance to travel agencies? I note the members' concern. Flight passengers will have to pay the APDT. The airlines collect the APDT. That's why we pay the airlines the administration fees. Some airlines sell their tickets to passengers directly. Others sell the tickets through travel agencies. So there's no direct link between the government and travel agencies because, after all, the partnership between travel agencies and airlines are commercial arrangements. We do understand Mr. Yu's point, and we will take this point away and discuss this with airlines. Any follow-up? No. Let's move on. Clause 4. And that's page 3 of the marked up copy. This is about collecting the fee. The financial secretary may approve an operator to retain any part of the tax collected by the operator, and that's section 10, subsection 2. And then the payment can be in a way designated by the financial secretary. Now we are adding subsections 2 and 3 under section 10, so that the operator can keep part of the fee collected to offset the fee payable to the government, and any part of the tax that is kept by the operator will not form part of the general revenue for the purposes of section 3, subsection 1. Now, clause 5. This is about the air passenger departure tax to be paid by each passenger. From $120, this will go up to $200. Any questions? No, we have covered every clause. Legal advisor. Any questions, comments about the drafting or legal matters? We wrote to the administration with questions. We have found no other legal or drafting issues. Thank you. So we have scrutinized the Chinese text of the bill. So can a legal advisor also confirm that the English version is also in order? Thank you. Can we switch on the microphone for the legal advisor? We have examined the English text, and we have found no discrepancy between the Chinese and the English text. So we have concluded the scrutiny of the bill. So members, any further amendment for the BC to consider? No. So as per our usual practice, our secretary will put out a notice checking with members whether they have proposed amendments in mind for the BCs to consider. If other members have draft amendments in mind, we will also invite the administration to provide a written response. So based on the follow-up matters, such as matters to be submitted by the administration, and also any draft amendments from members for the BC to consider. And I will look at whether we have such amendments and replies to decide whether we hold another meeting. And the government will confirm the date for resuming the second reading debate for the bill later on. Now, any other business? No other business? I adjourn the meeting here. Thank you.